everybody the same passwords on Legolas as you have on Rohan. I just copied things over and I used a similar shadow file. I just had to change what name went with the encrypted gibberish that was sitting there. So rather than giving you two separate passwords, you've got a common password, which, by the way, you're going to get instructions to change those passwords, make them be something else. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so we want to also be able to use finger to see if we've got all that finger information right, but it isn't set up just yet, so we're going to have to do one of those aptitude installs. You've got to be root when you try to do this to install that one. Okay? All right, so now you should be able to check whether you can get into Carol. We'll do the exact same command we had done before, only this time, now that there is an entry in the shadow file, you can get in as long as you know what that password was, and since it was supposed to match the user password, that should be enough to let you in. And you can look around a little bit here, do an ls-l, but also look at your dot file, so it'll tell you what dot looks like, and also what dot looks like, the /home directory and so on. And if you've done that install, then finger should show you the right information to me, the in real life thing being John Carroll and so on. All right, so we already talked about how that ampersand magic works in the GCOS field number 5 of the password. Okay, now, at present, the only person who's able to use the sudo command, this means, do something as super user, basically is where that comes from. It was set up by the installation program to be just that one user that we created to begin with, loser. So loser has the ability to do that, but this new guy that you added doesn't have the ability to do such commands. So you can try to do anything with sudo here, and it'll tell you, you don't have permissions to do that. All right, so I'm going to tell you how to fix that later, because you may as well fix all of them at once rather than doing it for every single entry that you add onto the system. Okay, so since I really don't want my password to be testing and I don't want to go in and change it on all 8 machines, you guys are going to change it for me. You're going to put in this particular gibberish with that particular capitalization, and that should let me onto the system. And if you screw that up, it's not going to let me onto the system. Now I've got stuff in italics here because depending on what time these things showed up, they might turn out to be different. But whatever it was for the loser account, you're just going to copy them in here. Right? So leave that part alone. All you were really doing on that line was changing loser to Carol and changing whatever gibberish testing worked out to be into this thing here. Okay? And notice, even though you know what the encryption stuff is, you don't really know what my password is that I'm using in that file. So leave everything else alone, and everything should be fine. All right, so if you're going to copy that loser line, assuming it's at the bottom of the file, you can just do a G, that's a movement command to take you to the last line of the file. Y yanks it, and then P puts it down below it. And again, you have to be a little bit careful. Maybe you're yanking that SSHD line rather than the loser line. But at least the capital G will get you close rather than trying to arrow down to the bottom of the file or something like that. Okay. Okay. Now, if it was the SSHD line, there's something like a star there to indicate, there's no password for SSHD. There's no way a user called SSHD is ever going to be allowed to log on. The encryption has to be at least 4 characters long. So if you only have 1 character in there, it's not going to match anything that anyone could possibly type. All right, but since they're using a fancy form of encryption, it's a lot longer than that little bit of gibberish that I gave you there. You have, I don't know, 100 characters or so here as the password between 1 colon and the next one. So basically what you do is you go to the beginning of that gibberish, just past the previous colon, right? And then tell it to change to the next colon that it finds. So we're going to change all the characters up to, but not including, the point where you find a colon along the way here. And that will take out all that big long 100 characters or so and replace it by whatever your fingers type next. So just make sure you type that, and basically you're done. Okay, now you can do similar things with the change command. If I do a C and then a close curly bracket, that would change from here to wherever the end of the paragraph is. Right? So whatever movement command you have, you change from that spot to wherever you would go. And a T command followed by a character will take you on that same line up to, but not including where that character is. It'll go just in front of that. There's an F that you could use here, find a colon, and that will go all the way to the colon rather than stopping just in front of it. So if we wanted to wipe out the colon, we'd use an F rather than a T. We don't want to change the number of colons in the line. Now, by the way, you ought to be able to infer when they do this encryption stuff, you never get a pattern here that's got a colon in it, right? Because then you'd have the wrong number of fields in the shadow file if colons could show up in there. You'd just get completely confused by that. So the encryption things that they use specifically don't do nasty things like put new lines in there or put colons in there, things that could confuse it. But they use just about every other conceivable character for their passwords. By the way, on these passwords that I'm about to hand out, it looks like they've been somewhat kind and they don't give you any passwords that have a lowercase l in them or the number 1 because they look the same on a piece of paper. But they do have zeros and capital O's, which sort of look the same. The zeros are slightly skinnier though on the printer that I'm using here. So if you've got something you're not sure whether it's a 0 or a capital O, we'll try both and hopefully one of the two will work. Okay. All right, so if we do that, then even these utilities that we don't use anymore because they're insecure would insist that you have a password associated with this. Okay, so you can't check my account anymore by trying to do an SSH over there and typing in testing because we put something else in there. But there are ways that you can test the account, and that's with this switch user thing. Okay? So let's look at where we are, and let's assume it's home loser or whatever. Okay? And we can do an SU to, remember, SU all by itself just takes you to the root account. SU with a dash will take you to the home directory of whoever you're assuming the identity is. And you can give it an extra field out here to say who you want to be. So SU-Carol should give you a UID of 1007, whatever the UID of Carol is, and it should move you to my home directory. Right? So even though you were in home loser a moment ago, you're now magically transported to home Carol. Right? And then just get out once you've tried that little experiment. Once you're out of that particular shell, you're back to being where you were just before you entered. Right? Now, if you do just an SU Carol from home loser, that shell that you've got may not know where it is. If this is not something that Carol can read, then it can't even see what directory it's in right now. Right? So often you'll do things with a dash or be someplace very public so that your shell doesn't get confused about where it lives. Okay. All right, now we also want mail to go elsewhere. And because I don't want to check my mail on all 8 of those machines there. So if you just happen to send mail to Carol on one of those little machines, it will leave a copy behind, but it will also move it along to Legolas. And I don't even let it stay on Legolas. From Legolas, I have a .forward file that sends it over to Rohan. So you can write me at either your workstation or Legolas or Rohan, and eventually that mail gets funneled over to me at Rohan if you set this thing up correctly. Okay? So notice it's not a // here, it's a \. That's important. And if we just said Carol, you basically get an infinite loop that would give me an infinite amount of mail, and I really don't want that. Right? Because it would try to deliver it, it would send a copy over to Legolas, but then try to put a copy in Carol's mail drop, which would then look at the forward file and send another copy to Legolas and try to put one in here and just keep doing it over and over. backslash prevents that nastiness from happening.
Why put in that Caroline and all?
Say again?
Why put the first line in and all?
Well, that leaves a copy behind for me in case I want to see it, but mostly it was a chance to talk about this thing that you do. Because I'm going to have you do a similar thing on your own accounts. You probably want to send your mail over to Gmail or whatever. But, you know, if you're right there on Rohan and doing some stuff, you can look in your own mail drop and see what happens. Because sometimes Gmail, if I send out the same message to 20 people, it thinks it's a bit of spam and you may never see it on your other thing, but it'll still be there on Rohan. And so that's mostly why I'm having to do it on those accounts. So in a roundabout way, that's how we came to try that. But you are right, I don't really need it on those machines, and I'll probably never look at it. But I will check to make sure that you did the right thing. All right. Now, we don't want people to be able to hijack the mail here. Now, it could be that when you set this thing up, one of the defaults is to give it permissions like this, so that not only the owner can write on this .forward file, but maybe other people in the group could write on that .forward file. Okay? And the sendmail utility, the one that handles this stuff, will not pay any attention to what's in there if it looks like an insecure thing. Right? Because if somebody could come in and hijack your mail and send it someplace else, that's not a good thing to have happen. So it won't do anything with the .forward file unless it's secure, namely only writable at most by the user themselves. So we'll do this command anyway. I don't think you really need it, but I'm going to have you do it just so I can talk about this little issue that can come up. And it's actually a little fancier than that. If it turns out your home directory could have been written on by other people, somebody could have come and moved your .forward file and put a different one in its place. That would be another way to do that. So if anything along the path to this .forward file is not a secure directory or file, then sendmail ignores it and won't do the forwarding that you've asked for. Okay. All right, so do the same things here as to who should own files, right? Normally, it wouldn't be the system administrator setting up the .forward file. You'd expect your user to go in there and put what they want in there. So you want to have this work out as though it were me coming in there and typing in my .forward file. Right? You're just going to do me this favor and get it done right. So make sure you have the ownership that would have happened if it would have been me doing it. All right, now we're going to add a couple of other things here. We're going to have a LabDude account. Oh, and Jose, remind me, I got to tell you what the password to this one is. So you can copy my line, for example, and just change it a little bit. Instead of 1007, it's going to be 1009, different group number and so on, and different name. So we'll set this up, and this account is not going to have TCSH, but it's going to use bash. So sorry about that, just do an exec TCSH if you want TCSH after you log on. Okay, and you're going to put this particular gibberish into the encrypted file, right? Into the shadow file with VIPW-S. Okay. All right, so you don't do a change group 9999 for this account, you do an 888, because that's the primary group for the LabDude account. Okay. All right, now, sometimes some system administrators will set things up where they won't fiddle with the VIPW-S, they'll just create an entry in the password file, and they'll use the password command to try to put something into the shadow file. And it turns out that works fine under SUSE, but it works fine under Mint, but SUSE, for example, just won't do that. If you don't have already a line in there, it doesn't let you try to change that password. So sometimes you really do have to go through it that way, or use SUSE's GUI interface to add users and so on. Okay. All right, so you may have noticed that LabDude is going to be home, LabDude, etc., and you're going to create your own home directories next. So each person should get a little chance at working with VI here to add their own names, etc. And I'm not telling you out of the box what your UID should be, but you don't just pick a random number for that. You want to use the same UID that you have on Legolas, which, as it turns out, is the same UID you have on Rohan. So look on either one of those two machines. In the password file, you can find your UID, or you can type the word ID, and it'll tell you what groups you belong to, what numbers they are, and what your UID is as well. So that would be another way to find it without even looking into the password file. But if someone goes into the password file, you can probably find all your group members all at once, right? Rather than having each person having to log on to Rohan to find out this information. Right? So you can write down what those numbers are, and then as each person adds their account, they can just look on that little piece of paper you've got and figure it out. All right, so that's, on a one per user basis where you'd be using this ID stuff. All right, so you're going to mimic those same set of lines there, right? And do all the various tests that most of the various tests. I think step C or something, which always fails. I'm suggesting you don't mess with that one. Right? But you do need to do sanity checks to make sure all of these things work. You're probably going to get tired of doing them, but if you don't do them all, something's going to go wrong in this lab. So there's your warning. Make sure you really do it, or I'll know. Okay. All right, so be a little bit careful if you are trying at some point, somebody screwed up their password, doesn't know how to get in, you want to change it for them. Don't just say password is root, because that'll change root's password, right? And then you'll be terminally confused from then on. You say password and you give somebody's username. Now, of course, that doesn't work as a regular user. You can't change somebody else's password unless you're root. Right? But as root, you do get to put an extra argument in there. All right. Ooh, I wonder if I've got the right GIDs on Legolas. I just created these accounts last night. It just now occurred to me I might not be giving you the right GID for there. I think it was going to be 1002. That might not be what's on there. So I have something that I have to check tonight. I'll send out some email or whatever if it turns out that I screwed that up. But it just occurs to me that's not something that I had done. All right, now with any luck, the root entry is on line 1. On some versions of Unix, they just alphabetize everything that's in there, and so the R's are rather far down the list, in which case we want to put it back up at the top. I don't recall what happens under Mint here, but find the line that begins with root : here, right? And then delete it and put it back up at the top. Right? And be careful, of course. If you looks like you might have screwed this up, you probably don't want to save those changes, and make sure you've got another root window up so that you can verify that you really can get back in as root, and that line really is there and makes sense. All right, now like you had done with the LabDude account, we're adding 3 more different accounts here. A JC account for me, and this is going to be one which gives me the super user privileges and so on, so I can come in and check all your work on each of those 8 machines. And we have a few other ones that use the Sash shell, and we'll talk about that later on, and also use the Z shell. And for each of these, we're going to use this particular bit of gibberish as the encrypted password. So you're going to go back to those same A through H substeps that we had before for each one of these guys. All right, now notice these guys don't need any new directories created. There's already a thing called /root there. That's root's home directory, and each of these, being administrative accounts, are just going to use that same home directory. They're all going to live in the same spot. So you don't need to do that part. Okay. All right, so make sure you do this, and if it turns out that something is wrong, maybe there's a misprint or something in here, you do want to, look around, rationalize it, and fix any misprints that you might have discovered by doing the checks that you ought to do. And in general, if you're hired by some company and you're about to give an account to the president or whatever, you don't just put things up there and assume it's going to be okay and then get yelled at when the guy can't log in. You really do want to check things out and make sure everything is correct. So that's a good habit to get into right away here in the course. Okay. Now, besides having a root account, we also want to make a T-root account. Many people are more familiar with TCSH than with bash. And this way we can have an account where you just have a shell. If you log in as T-root, well, you get by default your shell of TCSH rather than bash. Okay? And you don't have to do an exec over the TCSH to make that work. But of course, you want the same passwords in each of those files. So that's 2 lines now in the shadow file. Right? And the only change you're going to make is for the T instead of the word root on the duplicated entry. All right. So you can do a PS or whatever to see that you really are getting TCSH, again, if you have done it right. All right, now in step 45F there, we had trying to do a sudo thing there, and that failed. So again, as you add these other accounts, there's no point doing that failure over and over again. Do it once for Carol, and that's good enough. So now we want to find out the secret is why we can't do that, and how do we fix it. And again, there's on almost every Linux system, there's a little GUI interface you can use and decide who's allowed to become a super user. But we're just going to fix up the files and see where this stuff is stored. And that way it's a lot easier when it comes time to debug things. You can just go to those files and see what's wrong rather than poking around in the interface. Why is this button grayed out and I can't do anything with it? We don't have to mess with any of that. Okay. All right, so if you go look at loser there and do the ID command, you'll see a whole bunch of groups that are listed there. They give you control over the the sound card and various other things, the graphics card and stuff like that. If you go over to Carol and do an ID, you don't see a whole lot there because we didn't put Carol into a whole bunch of groups. Got his primary group and that's about it. So what we have to do is change etc group. This says who goes into what groups, essentially. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get through all of this here because I want to leave some time for you guys to get permissions here, but let's go a little bit further into this. So create a group.org from etc group. And then we want to change some stuff in here. So again, there's graphical user interfaces that let you add users and select what groups and so on, but we're just going to do this by hand here. Okay. And what we're going to do in this file here is search for the pattern called loser, and we're going to change that one word, and it's going to go up to where the colon is after the loser here, or the new line, or whatever you have there. Change the word, and now we're going to put in what we want it to be changed to. And we're going to put loser back in, right, comma, and we're also going to put Carol in there and labdo. These are all people who are allowed to use the su command. And then all your usernames as well. Right up to the very last one, and then escape to get out of change mode here. Now, don't put an extra space on the end, or it'll be looking for some guy with a username with a bunch of characters followed by a space, and it's not going to find that in the password file. Right? So, write in that last name, no spaces after these commas either, otherwise it'll expect somebody's name to start with a space, which is not at all what we want. Okay. So we do that, and that will make it the change at the first occurrence where we had seen loser. So whatever group loser has been put in, now we're putting them in, all these people into that same group. And then we're going to continue to make changes. Right? If I do /loser here again, that'll find the next one. But if you just do a plain old slash and then enter, it's going to use the same last pattern. So you don't even have to keep writing loser all over again. Just slash. And then, when you're at the right space here, you can just type a dot and say, do the last thing you did again, which would be to change the word loser into whatever you had put there. Right? So it'll be the same list. You don't have to type the same list a second time. You just have to make it do the same thing. So do a slash. Find the next occurrence, do a dot to replace it, find the next occurrence, and do the dot. Almost all the way through the file. But there is one line in the file that's going to have losers group itself. But normally it's going to be something like this, ADM colon, X colon, and then it has like loser sitting there. And that's the thing we want to change to a whole bunch of other lines. So every group where we see loser listed, we're going to list a whole bunch of things in there. But there is one line that goes like this, loser, colon, 1,000, colon, blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to change that. That's the name of a group rather than the name of a user in that case. So that thing, we don't want to put something with a whole bunch of commas before the first colon there, or we've screwed up that line. So watch what's happening here. When you do the dot, make sure you're not on this line where you're changing that guy down. Right, so loser is both not just a username, but also at some point it's a group name, just like Carol is going to wind up being your group name a little bit later on. Right, so that line there we don't want to change, but all the other ones you do want to change. And if you are a little quick on the draw, remember you will undo the last change that you had made. Okay, so that's one way to do it with VI. Another possibility is to do it with just one big substitution, right? And then we'd have to fix up that last line. So with a colon command here, we'll use the old EX editing style here. Here you could list a bunch of lines, like 1, 5 would mean change lines 1 to 5. But if you say percent, it means change from line 1 to whatever the very bottom line is. And this says, look for an old pattern, namely LUSER at the end of the line. $sign means end of line. And replace it by this new stuff that we have here, followed by a slash. And just hit enter, it does all of the changes for you all at once. So that's the faster way to get what you want. And since we insisted on only changing something when loser was at the end of the line, we don't wind up changing that one line that I warned you about. So that's actually the best way to get to the answers. Right? And that's described here. And that's the general thing that you can use for making these kind of changes in VI or using the set editor and so on. All right, so I think that's probably a pretty good stopping place for today then.